Good morning, Brazil. This is Muhammad Ali, serving you the hottest and most leading news of the hour. Your news, our business. GDP is the total market value of all final goods and services produced during a given time period within a country's borders, equal to the total income of the nation's households or the total expenditures on the nation's output. Brazil's GDP is 2.416 trillion, which makes it a high-income nation. Nevertheless, the GDP growth rate is 2.3%, which is low for an economy that is emerging. It is definitely on the low end of the spectrum. The nation has a high inflation rate of 6.2%, but can potentially rise in the near future. Given the alarming inflation rate, Brazil needs to work towards balancing the inflation rate and the Gini index that is 51.9 high to make necessity goods more accessible and provide better living standards to the low-income citizens. The nation could be experiencing a cost-push inflation caused by an anticipated negative supply shock that has caused resources to be scarce and prices to rise as producers compete to accumulate those resources. This is an example of stagflation, in which higher costs are passed to consumers as higher prices. A negative supply shock has led to an increase in the cost of production for the nation's producers. As a result, aggregate supply decreases from the full employment level. Price level has increased from PFE to P2, resulting in an inflation. A high inflation comes with many consequences. It lowers real income of the citizens and also reduces international competitiveness. A country experiencing high inflation will find demand for its goods fall among international consumers, as they become more expensive compared to the other country's goods. Also, higher prices and wages will reduce foreign investment in the country, as firms do not wish to produce where costs are rising, rather where costs will be low in the future. Despite being one of the most economically prosperous nations, Brazil still suffers a low GDP per capita of $12,100, and income is distributed unevenly. There is a large income gap between the wealthy households and those not as financially prosperous. The extent of income disparities is also evident in the high Gini index of 51.9, as mentioned earlier. Income inequality is a market failure, and without government intervention, will be rampant in a free market economy. The income inequality could be a result of the government's low interest in promoting equality in income distribution. The Brazilian government should be concerned of the high Gini index, as relative poverty is a possible consequence, and individuals may be unable to afford the basic necessities of life. Relative poverty is a state of earning an income that puts one in the lowest income level within his or her country. Unlike absolute poverty, it exists everywhere, since within even the richest nations, a proportion of the population earns relatively less than the top income earners. To measure the income equality of a nation, economists use a model known as the Lorenz curve, which shows the percentage of total income earned by the different segments of a nation's population. This curve tells us that Brazil is an unequal country because the poorest people earn a small proportion of total income relative to the richest. Brazil's Lorenz curve is further away from the line of equality, therefore it has a high Gini index. Brazil's unemployment rate has increased between the years 2012 and 2013, suggesting that it is more difficult to find jobs in 2013 and 2012. The rate is now 5.7%, which is above the natural unemployment rate. This suggests that the labor force is not fully employed, which could be due to the fact that the country has a high inflation rate, and as prices rise, the cost of production faced by producers rise as well. The Phillips curve is a graph which shows the relationship between unemployment and inflation in the short run. The shift in SRS causes a shift in the short-run Phillips curve. A negative supply shock causes both unemployment and inflation to rise. This is seen as a rightward shift of the Phillips curve. As workers have been laid off by firms due to the increase in cost of production, the number of people who are unemployed grows. The average working class might demand higher wages since the cost of living are rising. 27% of the GDP is made of government spending, which could be invested in providing public goods and necessities to citizens, given the alarming inflation rate that can potentially rise in the near future. Since the economy is now at full employment, we can assume that Brazil is meeting its macroeconomic objectives. Price level instability is evident in the alarming inflation rate. There is inequality in income distribution. The country is not producing at full employment level, and therefore it is not experiencing economic growth. Brazil is one of the world's richest countries, but also one of the world's most unequal countries.